last time we stopped at the point where we did what we call as reaction phenotyping, and in terms of studies involving drug metabolism in say drug discovery, development, or in academics, one of the other type of studies is the study of what is referred to as enzyme inhibition studies. Okay, basically, what we are talking here is inhibition of enzymes which are involved in drug metabolism by a compound in question. Okay, and in this case we say NCE in question. Okay. Now we know that many drugs which are there in the market are developed because they inhibit very specific enzymes. Okay, but these enzymes which they are inhibiting are related to the disease that is trying to be treated. Okay, for example, you might have angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, or you might have MAO inhibitors, etc. But that enzyme inhibition is related to the pharmacological effect of the compound. What we are talking here is the ability of that very compound which we are using as a drug, or we plan to use as a drug, which is now at the moment still a NCE, to inhibit enzymes which are involved in drug metabolism. Again, within the enzymes involved in drug metabolism, the focus seems to be, in most cases, on the ability to inhibit CYP450. Okay, now the reason for this worry is because if I have a compound which I'm using clinically, and that compound which is being used clinically has the ability to inhibit some drug metabolizing enzymes, then what might happen is that in case I'm using this drug as part of polytherapy, which means that in addition to me giving this drug to a patient, the patient is also taking some other drugs. And if this compound in some way inhibits some drug metabolizing enzymes, then there's a potential that this might affect the way the other compounds which are given as part of polytherapy may be metabolized, which means it might alter the PK, which means it might alter the AUC, and it might cause what is called as metabolism-based drug-drug interaction. Okay? Now that is the reason why whenever a compound is being developed, one of the things that they assess very early on is the potential of the compound to inhibit P450. The reason being, among all the drug metabolizing enzymes, P450 is responsible for a vast majority of drug metabolism reactions relative to the other enzymes. Okay. Now, what you have to remember is that whichever NCE we are talking about, whenever it is given to a person, it is in most cases it is going to be metabolized to its to inactive metabolites or metabolites having other types of activity as part of its own elimination process. Now, if I as an NCE am metabolized by a given enzyme, let us say that enzyme is cytochrome P450 1A2, okay, then by definition I also am an inhibitor of 1A2. Okay, and this is a very odd statement that I make, that if I am metabolized by 1A2, I am also technically an inhibitor of 1A2. The reason I make this statement is, let us say there are two drugs in vivo which are given at the same time and both are metabolized by 1A2. Now what will happen is, because of the relative Kms and relative Vmaxes, what you will find is these two compounds will compete with each other for the same enzyme. Neither of them is technically been designed as an inhibitor, but because they are both metabolized by the same enzyme, they act as inhibitors of each other. Okay, so that is the basis for my statement when I say that if I as a compound am metabolized by an enzyme like 1A2, then by default I am also going to inhibit that or behave as a competitive inhibitor in a given situation where there is another drug which is also metabolized by the same P450. Okay. Given that fact, the other aspects that you have to worry about when we talk about P450 inhibition or enzyme inhibition is that inhibition of an enzyme P450 also does not require that an NCE be a substrate. Okay. Now 2 minutes ago I talked about the issue where because an NCE is a substrate, it is also an inhibitor. But there can also be a situation where I have a compound which is not at all metabolized by a given P450 or any of the P450, but can still inhibit P450. Okay, and several such examples are known. And one of the reasons for this being possible is because of the fact that there can be what is called as allosteric inhibition. That means a compound inhibits an enzyme not by binding to the active site, but by binding somewhere else. Like we have, for example, non-competitive or uncompetitive inhibitor. Okay, so even if you have a situation where I have a compound which is not metabolized by, say, cytochrome P450, I cannot presume now that it will not be inhibiting P450. I have to make sure it does not. I have to check for it. Okay. The other aspect is what shall we use in order to check for inhibition. Okay, and several systems have been used. Okay, we can use purified enzymes and check whether an NC inhibits that enzyme. I can use microsomes, hepatocytes, etc., just like we have seen for other experiments. The third aspect is IC50 value relative to Ki values. Okay, when we talk about inhibition of an enzyme, you will find in literature two terms which are used fairly commonly to indicate the degree of inhibition. One is called as IC50 and the other is referred to as Ki. By definition, IC50 means the inhibitory concentration such that inhibition occurs to the extent of 50% of the original activity. Okay, for example, if I have an enzyme which converts compound A to B at the rate of 10 per minute, and I add inhibitor, so the concentration of inhibitor required to bring the speed down to 5 per minute. That means what we call as 50% inhibition would be called as the IC50 of that inhibitor. And the other thing that you also find in the literature is what is referred to a Ki value, okay, which is called as a inhibitory constant or inhibition constant. Now both IC50 and Ki have the same units of concentration. But the difference is that IC50 tends to be dependent on the way you do the experiment. Okay, so for the same compound, I can get different IC50 values depending on how I'm studying the activity and which substrate I'm using, etc., etc. However, in that regard, Ki values are dependent on only the enzyme and the inhibitor in question. Okay, and they tend to be invariant to an extent. Okay, and that's why of these two values, if you want to compare across labs or if you want to compare your data with somebody else's data, it is much better to compare Ki values than IC50 values, because sometimes depending on how you do the experiment, IC50 values may be different from lab to lab or from even day to day. Okay. Another aspect is how does inhibition occur? Okay, and in this regard, we know that inhibitors can be of different types. They can be what are called as reversible inhibitors or what we call as irreversible inhibitors. And we always worry whether the NCE in question that we are assessing for its ability to inhibit enzyme, how is it doing it? Is it a competitive inhibitor or a non-competitive or uncompetitive or irreversible inhibitor? And given the fact that we generate all this data with respect to an NCE, can we look at that data and then get a feel for how the DDI interaction may actually pan out clinically? Okay, in other words, can we predict the potential for drug-drug interaction as it would occur when the drug is going to be used? Okay, so with that, let us start looking at some aspects. Okay, so as I said, inhibition of enzymes, I'm going to use P450 as a base enzyme here, can be reversible or irreversible. And as the name suggests, reversible inhibition is where the NC in question interacts with cytochrome P450 in a non-covalent fashion and never quite forms a adduct with the cytochrome P450. The other thing is the inhibition itself is dependent on the presence of the inhibitor. So long as the inhibitor is there, you will see inhibition. If you remove the inhibitor from the milieu, the enzyme activity returns back to normal. And that's why it is called as reversible inhibition. As opposed to that, you can also have what is called as irreversible inhibition. In irreversible inhibition, the NCE in question interacts with the cytochrome P450 or the enzyme in a covalent fashion, forms a bond or an adduct such that now the enzyme activity is permanently destroyed. And the reason it's permanently destroyed is because covalent bonds are difficult to reverse in most cases. Okay? So in this case, even if you remove the inhibitor from bulk solution, you might find that the activity of the enzyme which is present in that system doesn't return to normal because some of those inhibitor molecules have formed an adduct with the enzyme. So that type of inhibition is referred to as irreversible inhibition, and a given NCE can show either type of inhibition. Okay. Now, as we go further, if your NCE is a reversible inhibitor, then it can be one of the three types. It can be what is called as a competitive inhibitor, a non-competitive inhibitor, or an uncompetitive inhibitor. Okay. Now, this type of inhibition depends on how the NCE interacts with the P450 in question. Okay. And depending on the interaction, you can have three different types of situations which are normally seen. One of the situations is in the presence of the inhibitor. Okay. If you are monitoring what is happening to a given substrate, you might find that the given substrate is metabolized by the P450 without any change in its Vmax, but the apparent affinity seems to be decreased. That is, Km appears to have increased. Okay, such type of an inhibitor which shows this result with respect to a substrate in question is referred to as a competitive inhibitor. A second type of inhibitor is a non-competitive inhibitor. What happens in this case is when the inhibitor is present, the way the substrate is being metabolized by the P450 is changed in that the Vmax is decreased but the Km is unchanged. Okay? And these types of inhibitors are referred to as non-competitive inhibitors. Okay. So, and this is shown graphically in this case. See, there is an original reaction which is going increasing with concentration in increase in the substrate concentration. But when the same reaction is done in the presence of the inhibitor, the profile that you see is somewhat like this. So if you look at the results of what is happening in the presence of the inhibitor, you find that to reach half Vmax, you take a higher concentration. That means your Km has increased. In this case, if you look very carefully, there is no change in the Km, but the Vmax is reduced in the presence of the inhibitor. And in the third case, what happens is both Vmax and Km of a given substrate is reduced in the presence of an inhibitor, and that is shown here. This is without the inhibitor. In the presence of the inhibitor, the curve is somewhat like this. Vmax being reduced and Km also being reduced. Okay. Now, in a Lineweaver-Burk plot or a what do you call it, double reciprocal plot, such type of inhibition will look like this. If this is the data in the absence of the inhibitor, when a competitive inhibitor is present, you will find that the line shifts, but in such a fashion that it still goes to the same point on the y-axis, indicating no change in the Vmax, but it will come down here a little closer to the origin, indicating Km has increased. In this type of inhibitor, you find in the absence of the inhibitor, if this is a profile, in the presence of the inhibitor, the line shifts a little bit. Now it meets the y-axis a little higher, indicating Vmax has reduced, but it still meets the x-axis at the same point, indicating no change in the Km. And in this case, in the presence of the inhibitor, you find that the data points are all parallel to the original data points in the absence of the inhibitor, indicating both Vmax has reduced, Km has reduced, and because of that, the slope, which is Vmax over Km, is not changed. Okay. Now, relative to this, an irreversible inhibitor behaves very differently. Okay. Shown here is what I just said. A reversible inhibitor interacts with cytochrome P450 in such a fashion that the interaction is reversible. It can come and it can go. It can come and it can go. But in an irreversible inhibitor, what happens is When a compound in question, that is the NCE, is introduced to the cytochrome P450, it actually forms a covalent bond with the P450, and because of the covalent bond formation, the enzyme is permanently inactivated. So there is no reversal. Okay. Now, just to complete our discussion, there are also some inhibitors which behave in what is called as a pseudo irreversible fashion or quasi irreversible fashion, where it actually forms an adduct with the P450, but the adduct is a little more labile than what you see here, and therefore over time the enzyme activity gets back to normal. Okay, so those type of inhibitors are referred to as pseudo irreversible or quasi irreversible inhibitors. Okay, now in a drug discovery and development setting, what you find is people study inhibition to different degrees of depth depending on what stage of the drug discovery development process one is in. Okay. Now, at the early stage, what is called as the discovery stage, what you try to do is get a quick feel for whether the NCEs in the question have any potential to inhibit cytochrome P450. And this is typically done using either recombinant P450s and fluorescent probes or what are called as purified P450s if you have access to it. And they're typically done in a very high throughput fashion using what are called as automated liquid handlers or fluorescent plate readers, etc. At a later stage, in the preclinical stage, when I want to assess inhibition, then I do a slightly more complex experiment using microsomes and drug probes, and I might be interested in more than just information whether there is inhibition. I might be interested in IC50 values or Ki values and so on and so forth. And here, because of the very nature of the studies that you do, they generally don't are not amenable all the way, all the time to high throughput analysis. And in a clinical setting, I might do inhibition in a in vivo fashion, where I actually look at the change in the pharmacokinetics of a given drug in the presence of the NC in question. Okay, and that might be a more involved study, more costly studies. Permissions will be required because I'm going to do in a in vivo study. But whatever be the case, the general philosophy is the same. If I have a compound which is metabolized very specifically by a given P450, which I call as a probe drug, and I look at its metabolism alone and in the presence of the test compound, if I find any difference, okay, in this case shown here as a reduction in font size, which means that normally I tend to get metabolism of my probe drug to the extent that I form a certain level of metabolite, but whenever my test compound is present, the amount of metabolite formed is less. This indicates to me that my test compound or NCE is an inhibitor of this reaction, and therefore then I will try and assess what is the IC50 or the Ki. Whether I do it by fluorescent probe, whether I do it by microsomes, or whether I do it in vivo in a patient in a clinical setting. Okay. Now, as we go into details of how that is done, there is a very simple cartoon. Okay, so this is basically tells you I do one reaction in the presence of a given P450, which I am trying to assess the meta inhibition of. Okay, written here as microsome. Okay, uh, when I find that my probe substrate is converted to a metabolite to a certain extent under a given set of conditions. Now I repeat this very experiment in the presence of a inhibitor that I am trying to study, okay, which is shown here in triangles. Okay. Now under these set of circumstances, if I find that the amount of metabolite that I form, which is shown here in green, to which a red dot is attached, I initially had 4 of them being formed. Now I have only 2 of them being formed. This tells me that in the presence of this inhibitor, I am getting less metabolite formation. And that is the basis for my analysis of enzyme inhibition. Okay. But before we go further, just a little bit more detail in terms of the systems that we use. Again, as I said, in vitro systems, cDNA express enzyme, microsomes, hepatocytes. In vivo systems, you can use animals, monkey, mouse, rat, what are preclinical studies, and later on in humans, what are called as volunteers or patients. Now you have to realize one thing, as you go from simple to more complex systems, complexity increases, but the confidence in your data is also more relative to very simple systems, which can be very fast, but sometimes may not give you data which is entirely accurate. Okay, so as you go from simple to complex, you actually give up what is called as speed for what is called as confidence in the results. Okay? Now, uh, just to refresh ourselves, we have been talking about probe substrates for different P450s as we try to assess their inhibition. Here is a list of typical probe substrates that are used for a given cytochrome P450. Okay, this list is not exhaustive and it keeps getting updated. And what you should do is go to the US FDA site periodically to look at which of the P450s they recommend as probes for doing these type of studies. Okay. So now what is important is each of this typical substrate or what is called the typical inhibitor has to be used under specific concentration conditions for them to act as a substrate probe or a inhibitor. Okay. On the left here, I don't know whether you notice, something very interesting is given here. Uh, all the P450s, which are typically formed in microsomes, are written here, and in the bracket is also written how much is their presence in microsome. Okay, so note very carefully, 3A4 is present to the greatest extent, followed by 2C9, then 1A2, and the other enzymes are much less, like 2D6 and 2E1 and 2A6, etc. Okay. So now before we go into details of how we study enzyme inhibition, we need to go back and make sure our basics of studying regular enzyme activity are clear. Okay. Now remember last time I told you that one can assess the way the enzyme is converting a substrate to product by two ways. One is to look at what is called as disappearance of the substrate, which is shown here as a decline and blue. Okay, so I can follow an enzyme reaction by looking at substrate depletion, or I can also follow a reaction by looking at what is called as product formation, which is shown here in pink. Now, in most cases, okay, and usually because it's much easier to do and technically a little less challenging, is people generally tend to look at product formation, okay, as a measure of how fast an enzyme is working or what is the enzyme activity. However, while doing an experiment where you are trying to look for how much product is formed with respect to time, you find that that experiment is very fragile in nature. And the reason is because of the instability of the enzyme. Also, in many cases, what you find is there is reversibility. That means a substrate is converted to product, but the same enzyme can also potentially do the reverse reaction, okay, and convert the product back to the substrate. And you can also have a phenomena of what is called as product inhibition. Uh, and also sometimes there are other factors. For example, the product may react or an intermediate which is formed before the product is formed can also inactivate the enzyme, etc., etc. Okay. So when we are assessing the activity of the enzyme, we have to worry about all of these things so that we make sure that our measurements are not in error. Okay. Now, as I said, one way to reduce these issues. And what issues? The issues of instability of enzymes or what you call as substrate depletion, reversibility of the reaction or product inhibition is to do the enzyme experiment under very what are called as initial conditions. Okay, what we mean by doing an experiment under what are called as initial velocity conditions or initial conditions is where you do an enzyme reaction, but you monitor the product formation only for a very, very short time after you start the reaction. And this short time is a time when the product formation is linear. Okay, and this is usually done so that all these other issues of, you see this curve here which is tapering off, that is telling you that as the enzyme is trying to convert substrate to product over time, after a while something is happening and you're losing linearity and the enzyme reaction is actually slowing down. Now, I do not want these complications. I want to know what is the true velocity. The true velocity is constant only for a very short period of time. Okay, and what are the conditions under which you tend to see this? That is linear product formation over our time interval is when the substrate concentration has not changed drastically relative to what you started with. Also, you see that when not too much product is formed so that it has a potential for getting converted back to the substrate. Okay, and given that not too much product is formed, there's also less chances of a product inhibiting the reaction. Okay, so these are generally referred to among people who do enzyme kinetics as what are called as initial velocity conditions. That means I start an enzyme reaction, but I do the reaction for a very short period of time. Typically, this is till I'm sure that there is less than 10% depletion. I've written 20%, but typically most good enzyme laboratories will not allow for more than 10% substrate to be depleted as they are measuring the product formation. Okay, this is a spelling mistake here. It is not depletion or depletion. Okay, so the first thing I have to make sure is when I'm doing enzyme inhibition studies, my control experiment, that is the experiment where I'm looking at product formation with respect to time, that experiment has to be done under these conditions so that I'm only measuring initial velocity. Okay, and then I look at the effect of the inhibitor on this initial velocity. Now think of this, this makes it very interesting, right? I told you that the only time you see these conditions is when substrate is not depleted to an extent of more than 10%, which means that here I'm looking at only about 10% conversion of substrate to product, which means if I have a substrate concentration that I start with of, let us say, 10 micromolar, I have to make sure that the product that is formed is never more than 1 micromolar, which will tell me that I'm working under these conditions, okay, where substrate depletion is less than 10%. Now, given that fact, it puts a little bit of pressure on my analytical methodology that I should be able to measure very small amounts of product. Not only that, since I'm assessing inhibition, that very assay should also be able to catch a decrease in the rate of this production as I add inhibitor, which means now what, in the presence of the inhibitor, I'm expecting even less than 1 micromolar to be formed because my substrate concentration is only 10 micromolar. So my analytical methodology has to be able to measure not only low level of product formation accurately, but also inhibition in that product formation in the presence of an NC. And this is what makes enzyme inhibition studies a little challenging to do. And in the same way, interesting to do. Okay. Now, as I said, to obtain valid pharmacokinetic enzyme kinetic data, enzyme must be stable during the determination of initial velocity. That means at this stage here. Okay. Also, we should make sure we are always measuring initial velocity. So the time of sampling to determine dP by dt is limited by the fact that you can only do so up to this time point where things are linear. Also, velocity must be proportional to enzyme concentration. That means there's a check done to make sure that if you are doing everything right, then under these set of conditions where you are measuring initial velocity, if you were to double the enzyme concentration, the reaction velocity should also double. Okay. Again, given the fact that those the initial velocity conditions are maintained. Okay. which means in most cases, before you begin on a journey to do enzyme inhibition studies, we first do what is called as linearity with respect to time, which is this experiment, and linearity with respect to protein concentration, which is this condition. Only when these two are fulfilled correctly that you know that you are going to be working in this region, which is the first order region, and that will give you the best quality of data. Okay. Okay. Now, going back to our principles of enzyme kinetics, we know that the basis for our understanding of enzyme kinetics is is the fact that we look at enzyme reaction occurring in this fashion: E plus S going to ES with a forward rate and a reverse rate, and this ES complex breaking down to give you E plus P. We assume in most cases what is called as steady state conditions, and we use Briggs-Haldane derived equation uh, in order to understand the relationship between the velocity of the reaction, Vmax, and the substrate concentration, and what is also called as the Km. Okay. Now, you have to also realize that when you talk about cytochrome P450, cytochrome P450 doesn't actually show this type of behavior. Okay. If you remember the P450 reaction, no, it says RH plus NADPH plus H plus O2 giving you ROH plus NADP plus H2, which means a simple setup of E plus S doesn't actually work for P450. In case of P450, it should be P450 plus RH plus NADPH plus O2 and then all of these things. Okay. Now that would make enzyme kinetics extremely complex to study in a very routine fashion. So what we tend to do is we tend, when we work experimentally, to add enough NADPH that it is in excess. We also make sure that the enzyme reaction is open to oxygen, and that oxygen is rarely rate limiting. Under those conditions, because cofactor NADPH is in excess and oxygen is also in excess, the enzyme actually tends to behave in this simplistic fashion. Okay, now please remember, in a real case, P450 is a fairly complex enzyme, but because you have added extra NADPH and and oxygen is available in plenty, it actually conforms to this Briggs-Haldane treatment of a simple enzyme reaction. Okay. Now here K2 is also referred to as Kcat. Okay, we all know this. Okay. Now, what is important is to understand that under these conditions, the velocity of the reaction will be given by Vmax S over Ks plus S, which is always called as a Michaelis-Menten equation, and the more commonly used transformation of that, which is called as the Briggs-Haldane equation, which is V is equal to Vmax S over Km plus S. Okay. Now this V here is actually initial velocity. Okay, determined under conditions of less than 20% depletion. Okay, so this equation holds true only and only if you are monitoring velocity under those very strict conditions that we just talked about. Okay, less than 10% depletion, everything being linear, and so on and so forth. So under those situations, Km is an indicator of what you call as kind of the affinity of the substrate for the enzyme, and Vmax gives you an indication of how fast an enzyme is working. Now, remember, this Vmax is dependent on the amount of enzyme because it is equal to actually K2 E total, and Km is got units of concentration, but it is equal to K minus 1 plus K2 over K1. So it indirectly reflects affinity, which is K minus 1 over K1. Okay, it is defined as the concentration of substrate that yields a velocity value, the initial velocity value, which is equal to Vmax over 2. Okay, and we know that simplification. That means if K were equal to S, this will become 2S. S and S will cancel, and V would be equal to Vmax over 2. Okay. So again, a quick visit to the basics as we go forward. Okay. Now, with that background, in a discovery development setting, we might do inhibition experiments of different types. One is called as a quick determination of Ki, especially when you suspect what is called as when you suspect reversible inhibition. Okay, and let us see how this is done. Okay, now if I want to find out the ability of my NCE to inhibit an enzyme, which I presume is going to occur in a reversible fashion, uh, and I want a quick assessment of the Ki value, then I do the enzyme inhibition experiment in a very interesting fashion. The first thing I do is choose a suitable substrate probe for the enzyme. Okay, for example, let us say I'm working with microsomes, and microsomes have got a mixture of all the P450s, and I am interested in assessing the ability of my NCE to inhibit one among the many P450s which is present in the microsome. Let us say, for example, 2D6. Okay. So if that is the case, then I would choose a substrate probe which is very, very specific for 2D6. Okay. For example, if we were to go back to that table that we had, here it says 2D6, and one of the probes is dextromethorphan. Okay, so what I would do is I would choose dextromethorphan because that would be the correct substrate probe for me to assess the activity of 2D6 and later on the ability of my NCE to inhibit that 2D6. The second thing I do is I use this substrate probe, which is dextromethorphan, at the reported Km of that substrate for the given enzyme 2D6. Okay, and the reason I do that, okay, I'll tell you that a little later. Okay. Now, given that I've decided on these two, for example, I've chosen dextromethorphan because I want to assess 2D6 inhibition, and second, I've picked the correct concentration of dextromethorphan to use, which is equal to Km. Now I go to the NCE. What concentration of NCE would I want to study in order to see whether it is able to inhibit 2D6? If I have some idea of what are the expected concentrations in an in vivo setting, whether preclinical or clinical, then what I might do is use that concentration and relative to that 1/10 of that and 10 times that. Okay. And if I have got no information about what might be the expected plasma concentrations, then to start off, I might simply pick three concentrations, which is 1, 10, and 100 micromolar. Okay. So now what I've done is chosen the substrate, the concentration at which I'm going to use the substrate, and likewise the concentration or concentrations at which I'm going to use the NCE. Now what I do is I take microsomes, I add substrate at a given concentration, and what I find out is how much product is being formed under a given set of conditions where I have added NADPH and do the incubation openly in the presence of oxygen. Okay, and that experiment would be called as a control incubation without NCE. Okay, that tells me that under this given set of conditions, how much product is being formed. Then what I do is I repeat an experiment of the same type in the presence of an NCE. Okay? Now, if the NCE is water soluble, then I prepare all my stock solutions typically in water and add it to the incubation and do the experiment. However, I might also find sometimes that my NCE is not water soluble or soluble in buffer. In that case, I might have to prepare solutions in a co-solvent. But if I do that, I have to make sure that the amount of co-solvent I put in the final incubation is always less than 1%. Okay. Now, after doing all that, I have to make sure that the time for which I am incubating and the concentration of enzyme that I am using, which is dependent on how much microsomes I add in this case, should not result in more than 20% depletion. Again, why? Because then only I will be assured that everything is linear. Okay. So, two experiments are typically done. One, a control reaction where dextromethorphan gets converted to product by a certain amount of enzyme over a certain amount of time. That tells me what is the basal level of formation of the metabolite whose reaction is catalyzed by 2D6. And then I look at what happens to that very same reaction in the presence of differing concentrations of NCE. Okay. Now, given the fact that I've done the experiment under these set of circumstances, what actually happens is something like this. Okay. Let us say I am able to get at what is referred to as the IC50. Okay. That means uh, one of the concentrations, okay, somewhere in this range is able to inhibit this reaction that I'm studying to the extent of 50%. Now, this concentration can be related to the Ki depending on what type of inhibition is by using this philosophy. Okay. Now, remember, I did the experiment uh, under what is called as conditions where substrate concentration is equal to the Km value. Okay. So, the V is equal to V max S over Km plus S would actually work out to V is equal to V max S over S plus S. That means my basal metabolism in the control incubation would actually give me a velocity which is equal to V max by 2. Now let us say for argument that my NCE is a competitive inhibitor and it is able to inhibit this enzyme to the extent of 50% at a given concentration. That concentration will be called as IC50. A typical competitive inhibitor alters the enzyme kinetics in this fashion, where a competitive inhibitor changes the Km, not affecting the Vmax. And the way it affects the Km is I plus inhibitor concentration over whatever is the Ki. Okay. Now, when incubations are performed at the Km of the substrate and you observe 50% inhibition, then what you are actually going to observe at IC50 of the inhibitor will be V by 4, because remember the control was done where Km is equal to S and that was only V by 2. Now you are inhibiting that to extent of 50%. So it becomes V by 4. And that V by 4 will actually end up being equal to 1 over 2 plus IC50 over Ki. Okay, why? See, remember, this V is equal to V max over 4. So V max and V max will cancel, it will be 1 over 4. All these are all S values. So it will be 1 over what you call as 2 plus IC50 over Ki. This works out to this condition where IC50 is equal to 2 Ki. That means under these conditions, whatever IC50 I determine will actually directly give me a Ki value in a very quick fashion. Okay, now this way of doing an experiment is fast, but it is not very accurate, but it gives a good idea. Okay, not only that, what you find is uh, the IC50 for non-competitive inhibition is actually equal to Ki. So, irrespective of the type of inhibition, what you find is IC50 you determine is either directly equal to Ki or just it is twofold of the Ki value. And sometimes this information is very crucial. Even though it is not accurate, it gives you a good idea of the potential of your compound to inhibit the P450. Now, how do I obtain IC50? I simply obtain the IC50 by looking at how the inhibition occurs with log concentration, and I choose the concentration at which I see 50% inhibition. Okay. So, this experiment of very quickly getting a Ki is done routinely in drug discovery and development. Okay. Now, sometimes you might be interested in actually getting a correct value for Ki in a very classical experiment where you are very sure about the determined Ki value. Okay. That experiment is a little more involved. Okay. Now see what is done in that case. Once again, depending on which isoform that I am trying to study the inhibition of, I have to choose a substrate. Okay. Now, once I've chosen the substrate, now see how the experiment is done. I choose different concentrations of the given substrate ranging from zero point 0.2 times the Km to 5 times the Km. Okay? Likewise, I also choose 0.2 times to 5 times the preliminary estimated Ki value of an NCE. Okay, and many times the actual different concentration that you pick turn out to be around 6 or 7 as you go from 0.2 to 5 times. Okay, so overall I've chosen about 7 concentrations here and I've chosen 7 concentrations here. Now what I do is something very interesting. At a given concentration of substrate, I study the effect of this entire range of concentration of inhibitor. Then I do the same for the next concentration of substrate. Again study at that second concentration the effect of NCE over the span of concentration. I do the same for the third, fourth, fifth, sixth. So I get a more elaborate set of data. In all cases, I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing what is called as a control incubation, and I'm also doing an incubation in the presence of an inhibitor, always making sure at all times that I never violate this rule of depletion of substrate. And then I look at the data. Okay. So if I find data is somewhat like this, so here I have a situation where the data with respect to increasing concentration of substrate with respect to uh, the formation of the product gives me this line here on a Lineweaver-Burk plot. Then I see what happens to that very line in the presence of different concentrations of inhibitor. Okay, I just take that back. Here, if you remember, I told you that I pick one concentration of substrate and the range here. No, it's actually the reverse. Okay, so I pick one concentration of the NCE, which is the inhibitor, and study its effect at different concentrations of substrate, which means basically I'm doing what is called as a velocity versus substrate concentration curve of the substrate at different concentrations of inhibitor. When I do that, I get these lines here. If all these lines meet on the y-axis but meet at different points on the x-axis, that tells me it's a competitive inhibitor. If the same thing happens like this, it tells me it's a non-competitive, uncompetitive inhibitor. Okay, and what I can do is by looking at what are these the changed values, I can get at what is the Ki value. And if I find this, it's what is called as a mixed inhibition. Okay, where it is changing Vmax also and Km also, and I might have a true what is called as non-competitive inhibitor, is the changes only of Vmax and no change in the Km. Okay. Now, in order to generate these lines that I talked about, so this is the line where I study conversion of substrate to product at different concentrations of substrate. Okay. Then I repeat that same experiment at one concentration of inhibitor. Repeat the same at a second concentration of inhibitor. Typically, I'll have 7 or 8 lines and see where they meet in order to understand in detail what is the Ki value. Okay. So, any questions till this point? Any questions? Any comments?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello,
Hello.
sir. Girish here.
Bolo. Yeah.
Sir, what is alpha there in those lines?
Where? Here. Alpha.
Yeah.
Then alpha is okay. Now I'll show you on this thing. Okay. Here alpha is basically 1 plus I over Ki. Remember that is the factor by which everything changes. Alpha. I've shown that here. See this 1 plus I over Ki. That is a factor by which usually you find changes in the Km or in the Vmax, and that is what is shown there. Okay. Now, when you have a mixed inhibition, effect on Km and Vmax is slightly different. That's why it is alpha and alpha prime. But if it's a true a non-competitive inhibitor, then this becomes same, alpha and alpha prime. Then you'll get that. Okay. So that is basically kind of 1 plus I over Ki. Okay. Any other question? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about how you determine irreversible inhibition. Okay. Now this experiment is a little more tricky because if you remember, I told you irreversible inhibitors are those inhibitors which kill the enzyme. That means now I have to try and find out what happens to my enzyme when it is put in the presence of a given NCE. Okay, uh, and that NCE inhibits it in an irreversible fashion. Okay, the logic of the kinetics is somewhat like this. Okay, now again, just like we look at enzyme reaction by looking at depletion of substrate or formation of what is called as product. Here also what I can do is I can monitor what is happening to my enzyme by seeing how much enzyme is left as my NCE is exposed to a given enzyme, by following how much functional enzyme is left. Or what I can try and do is try and find out how much inactivated enzyme is formed as the reaction proceeds. Okay. Now the logic of following intact enzyme and how it depletes with respect to time, or how much inactivated enzyme builds up, is the same kinetics that we have seen before. Okay. Now typically what people do is try and find out this log percent enzyme activity remaining with respect to time. Okay. And so when you plot that log percent enzyme remaining with respect to time, what you end up getting is that as you expose your enzyme to the NC for longer and longer time, the more time it gets to inactivate the enzyme, you'll find that if you expose your enzyme to the NC for longer and longer time, the amount of enzyme left active will start reducing with respect to time. And this reduction is of a first order fashion, which has got a inactivation rate constant, which is per time, okay, units of per time, having a value or which is referred to as K init. Okay. Now this is what you are trying to assess when you have a irreversible inhibition, that how much enzyme is still remaining as time progresses. Okay. And that is why this type of inhibition is also referred to as time dependent inhibition. Okay. Now one way to assess whether this is happening or not is shown here. Okay. Now what you do first is pick a concentration of NCE to study. It's the same, I've told you before, if you know the plasma concentration, that 1/10 of that or 10 times that, and if that is not known, a standard 1, 10 and 100. Then you make sure there is enough NADPH. Then you make sure you have a solution or solvent in which you have dissolved the NCE as a control or vehicle. Make sure you do an incubation without NCE so that you see how the reaction is proceeding when there is no NCE. And then you do something very interesting. You pre-incubate microsomes for different amounts of time, for anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes with the NCE. Okay, with the NCE. So see what is going to happen in this case. What I'm going to do is basically take buffer, take my microsomes, add my NCE to it. Okay. Also, I might do an experiment where I add NADPH or don't add NADPH, and then I wait. I wait for sometimes 10 minutes before I add the substrate. Okay. Sometimes I wait for 15 minutes before I add the substrate. Okay. But you have to remember, before I add the substrate, what I do is take a sample from this pre-incubation mixture, dilute it tenfold. The reason I dilute it tenfold is to reduce the effect of the NCE that I've added. Okay. But now do something very interesting. After dilution, I add fresh amount of NADPH and I add substrate such that I measure the Vmax, which is 5 to 7 times the Km value. Okay. When I measure the Vmax, I indirectly measure how much enzyme is remaining, because remember Vmax is equal to K2E total. So measuring Vmax directly gives me an estimate of how much enzyme is left. Okay. So look at this very complex experiment. One, I take my microsomes, I add different concentrations of NCE, wait for different amounts of time, then I dilute that, what they call a sample which has been pre-incubated tenfold. To that I now add the probe substrate and I measure the activity. And I do the same experiment without any NCE, which is my control. Now, the expectation is somewhat like this. Okay. Now, I'm going to flip these two slides for a second. Okay. Now, normally, what you will find is if an NCE has a tendency to inhibit the enzyme by reacting covalently with it, the more time you keep it, you find that the amount of activity remaining is less and less. And you see this decline. Okay. Now, when you do the same experiment at a slightly higher concentration of NCE, then this rate of decline will be even faster. If you do it in even higher concentration, it will be even faster. If you do it in slightly higher concentration, you will do it faster. And you get a whole set of data which tells you how is this decline occurring at different concentrations of the NCE. So basically, each line gives you an estimation of what is called as a K inact or a half-life for inhibition at different concentrations of the NCE. And you use this data to determine what is called as a K inact value, okay, or what is sometimes also referred to as a half-life limit, or the shortest half-life possible for inactivating the enzyme by what is referred to as a Kitts-Wilson plot. Okay. Now, given that fact, if I go back quickly, variations of this experiment are as follows. Okay. In one case, you don't take samples at different time points, you just incubate directly for 30 minutes. Okay. So here what happens, I do one incubation where I pre-incubate for 30 minutes without NCE, then I incubate at a certain concentration of NCE for 30 minutes and see how much activity is remaining. I don't do a time course. Okay. Or sometimes you can also do without any dilution. So people do that also. Okay. I don't dilute, I simply add. All variations are done and the idea is the same. Okay. And this is what you are expecting. Okay. Now, if the activity of an enzyme reduces in a concentration depending manner when pre-incubated with an NCE, you know that there is time dependent inhibition. Okay. Now this is the interesting part. If this time dependent inhibition is observed without the need for NADPH, that tells you that the compound is inherently active. It doesn't need to be activated, and such type of compounds are referred to as affinity labels. However, if you observe this time dependent inhibition only in the presence of NADPH, what it tells you is that your P450 is somehow catalytically activating the NCE to form a reactive intermediate which is forming a covalent bond with the enzyme. That means you have what is called as mechanism based or what is called as catalytic inhibition or suicide inhibition. Okay. Now in the bracket here I have also written something called as IC50 shift. Okay. Now there are two ways you look at what happens in the presence of an NCE. Either you actually look at the actual reactions that I told you, what happens to the enzyme activity remaining, or you do what is called as IC50 shift. IC50 shift is simply this. I do an experiment where I look at different concentrations of NCE and the ability of the NCE to inhibit my given P450, and based on that experiment, estimate a IC50. Now, what I also do is I do the same experiment by incubating the incubation mixture without NADPH or plus NADPH. Now, see what happens in this case. When there is no NADPH, the IC50 is almost the same as before. That means what? Without NADPH, nothing has happened to the enzyme. Okay, and therefore the IC50 that you calculate is still the same as you did before. But see what happens in this case. When I add NADPH, the IC50 shifts, and it shifts to a lower value. That means what? It tells me that now less amount of NCE is required for me to inhibit the enzyme by 50%. Now, why would this happen? This can only happen if by doing this pre-incubation in the presence of NADPH, some enzyme has been inactivated. The minute some enzyme gets inactivated, what happens now is I have less enzyme left. So I'll reach 50% of the activity of the original much quicker at a lower concentration of inhibitor. So I see what is called as a IC50 shift. And that tells me that my enzyme has been inactivated. Okay. So it doesn't matter which way you do it. Okay. The idea is to see whether when I pre-incubate with NADPH or without NADPH, what is the profile that I'm seeing. If I see a shift in IC50 or reduction in activity without NADPH, that means I'm dealing with the affinity label, which is irreversibly inhibiting the P450. While if this occurs only in the presence of the cofactor, that means I have a compound which is catalytically converted to a reactive intermediate by P450, and I have what is called as mechanism based time dependent inhibition. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is probably stop here. It's about an hour, and that is the time for which we do stuff. Okay. And when we meet next time, go further and talk about how we use the data that we have just determined, IC50 or Ki value in case of a reversible inhibitor, and IC50 or I should say K inact value in case of a irreversible inhibitor, in order to judge what you might actually observe clinically, okay, in a discovery and development setting. Okay, so any questions till now? We're going to stop here for the day. Any questions? Anyone?
Sir, this is Sandhya here.
Hi, Sandhya. Yeah.
Yeah. Sir, would you like to comment on the difference in the dilution versus non-dilution? Because their literature seems to be a bit
Yeah, I know.
this on that. Fuzzy on that. They have papers comparing both of them, but I want to know your comment on that.
See, when these experiments were done very originally, what they said is that you should dilute it, and the reason you should dilute it is you do not want the effect of the uh, NCE to continue, because if you think very carefully, when I have an NCE that I have added to an incubation mixture, even if it's a irreversible inhibitor, there's always a reversible component which occurs in the background. Okay, and they wanted to remove this reversible component which is occurring in the background when I'm doing the assessment of how much enzyme is remaining. Okay, and therefore the idea was to dilute it. Okay, but the problem with diluting is that now I've done the first set of experiment at an enzyme concentration which is 10 times more than what I'm doing the remaining activity.
Correct.
Okay, and a lot of people felt that that is on one case maybe putting a lot of pressure on the analytical method. Okay, now I need two analytical methods, one which works at a higher concentration and the other which works at a much lower concentration. Okay, and and there were arguments as to whether there is ever a need to dilute. Okay, let that effect occur in the background, no, because you are doing a control. Okay, because you're doing a control, that reversible component will be taken care of. Okay, and again, you have to remember you're doing the incubation for a very short time. Okay, and when you do undiluted, you get a much better rate of conversion of the probe substrate. Okay, and there is less strain on the on the analytical method. Okay, so a lot of people nowadays don't do that dilution. Okay, uh, and it works much easier. Okay, and the other thing is, if you don't have to do the dilution, no, then I don't have to add too much enzyme in the first step,
Correct.
accounting for the fact that I'm going to be diluting a little later. Okay,
Later.
because that creates a lot of issues. Now I add more enzyme, that means there is more microsomes, there is more protein binding,
Protein binding.
etc., 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 etc. So I think nowadays people, I think even I would prefer not doing any dilution. There is no need to do the dilution. You will still catch mechanism base even without not diluting it.
Okay.
So that is my opinion.
And sir, how do you deal with the affinity if you detect an affinity label further going forward? The equations or the graph for that would be similar.
Affinity labels show almost the same behavior that you see for a mechanism-based inhibition. The only thing is, all these profiles that I showed you, you will see in the absence of NADPH. There is no need to add NADPH, but you will still determine what is called as K inact and all of those things.
Okay, all of that.
Yeah, all those will be the same.
And lastly, a very basic question is to how much variability in IC50 is accepted?
Variability in IC50 or KI?
IC50.
IC50 you can doctor the way you want. Don't trust only the IC50. I don't
I
trust
do an
IC50
experiment
too much.
today and I get an IC50 of 10. I do the experiment a month later, I get an IC50 of 3.
See,
Would I
if
accept that?
uh, I find that happening even normally, okay? Because if enzyme degrades or NADPH degrades, your buffer pH is off a little bit, your ionic strength is off a little bit, all that affect the basal activity and therefore they'll affect the IC50. Okay, but if you're doing it in your own lab and you are the same person who's doing it with the same set of microsomes and stuff like that, then I think you should not be going more than 2 or 3 fold. Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
so if I determine today IC50 of 20, then when I do it at a later date, I shouldn't drop to 1 or 2. Okay, if it drops to 10, 12, or it increases to about 30, I can live with. Okay.
Okay.
But if it goes to 2 or if it goes to 55, 60 or something, then I have to be watchful as to what I have been doing. Okay. So in your own lab, hopefully it should not go beyond 2-fold. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Anyone? Okay. So let me stop the screen sharing and let us see if for a moment we can see each other before we say goodbye for the day. And we'll meet again and continue this next week as to how we use this SIP inhibition. Okay, just a second as I've stopped sharing what that is. Let me see if there I go. Uh, so there I go. I'll open my video there. How is everyone?
Good.
Karnataka, what Sunday curfew they are starting now? Huh?
Yeah, since next Sunday onwards.
We can't even go out on a Sunday. We can't go out on any days. Okay, so
Yeah, I pity you.
we are curfewed out any which way. Hi Sahil, hi Vinay, hi Girish, hi Deepali.
Hi, sir.
Good, good. Okay, so all of you take care. All of you stay positive, stay chirpy. Things will end. Don't worry. and we'll see you again next week. Oh, okay, today all 3 vivas went well.
Oh, great.
All of them did really nice. Okay,
Oh,
Pooja, Mohammed, and Shweta Nagarkar.
Nagarkar. Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
now only one is left tomorrow, Madhulika.
Tulika.
Even इसका हो गया, भाग्यश्री का भी वाइवा हो गया. She also did well. Okay,
Yes.
चलो everyone,
Bye.
Bye.
take care.
Yes, sir.
And
You
Bye,
too.
sir.
see you around. Okay, so
Bye.
I'm into quit.